Today's Sunday's daf is daf lamed tes, and we are continuing the dinim of Bishalakim going through the entire Mishnah. So this Mishnah talks about things which you're not allowed to eat, but it's mutter bahano. We're going through the Mishnah. So the Mishnah continues and says the todis trufa, this todis, this fish called todis, that's all scrambled up, it's all minced, and seared and brine she'ain ba daga. There's no fish in it, and what it doesn't have the chiluk. You know, my chiluk. What is this? Sorry, before we get the chiluk, we had a machlekes before. We know fish is in it, but machlekes Rishonim that according to Rashi, there's some kind of spontaneous birth that only happen in the brine from kosher fish. And Taisa says no such thing. He said they used to have a minute to put actually. He doesn't believe there'd be treifa fish coming out of it in the brine of a kosher fish. He said they used to put a kosher fish to tell you that this is kosher fish. Anyway, then it says in the Mishnah chiluk. What in the world is this chiluk? Zuz sultanis, a fish known as sultanis. So why is it also the fish sultanis is a fish that it doesn't have fins and scales when it's in the early period, but then as it grows older and matures, it has the kosher signs. So why should it be not kosher? Why does the Mishnah say you can't eat it? Why is it also? Because in the mixture, when you catch it in the young stage, there will be tomei fish there as well, and you won't know if it's tomei fish or not tomei fish because it has none of the signs. Even though we did learn the Gemara before that the professionals, the mumchim, they knew exactly what it was because they were trained, but the average person doesn't know. So what we learned. What exactly is the sultanis? It's a fish that doesn't have the kosher signs now, but we'll have it later. You go and have sultanis and offer some other fish. Even though currently it does not have the telltale signs, they are permitted. There's a whole chakira the Rogachover has. When we say that the kosher signs of an animal, he has a chakira. Is the pshat that the kosher signs is what makes it kosher? Or is the pshat, this is a sign, how do you know that the fish in essence is kosher? The kosher signs don't make it kosher. This is just the signs that this is from the kosher species. And one of the lies that they talk about is that it's not that the signs make it kosher, because if it's the signs that make it kosher, then the early stages of this fish sultanis, while it doesn't have the signs, why are you permitted to eat it already at that stage? Then the Gemara continues. What about the What about while it's in the water, it has the telltale signs, but when you take it out of the water, it loses it. It's also kosher. Kigoyin akunim ba'apunim. These are different kinds of different kinds of fish, which we don't know what they are. Mutter, they're all permitted. Then he says, Rabbi Bru made an announcement in Kisari, kirve dogim, the innards of fish. The ubri, and so too the eggs that you find inside the fish, nikochim mikolad, you can buy from any person. Why? Cheskosam, because we know that in this region, where do they buy these particular fish? Ain't them boy, they only come from the Plusa and Vaspamia. Vaspamia generally is Spain. They come from Plusa or from Vaspamia. Kiho, Dom Rabbi he said that Sachanta, this fish that we discussed before, chilik or sultan is what's called devav nara, come from the river called devav, is shy. They're all permitted because we know there's no tamid fish there. What do you mean? My time or why? How do you know there's no tamid fish there? Is it because the current is so strong and therefore a tamid fish that does not have a spine? I don't tamid, even less like chutashed, tamid doesn't have a spine. Therefore, if those fish cannot inhabit these waters, we see clearly that even fish that are not kosher can swim against the current. The water is salty, and the saltwater fish, only kosher. High dog tummy, less they calculate. And since this non-kosher fish doesn't have any scales, it can't live in a region where there's no salt water. Moreover, we see fish that they do exist. The reason is because the ground is not a good resting place for the eggs of these kind of tummy fish, dog tummy. So based on this, there's a big argument in Halacha, Poskin, Moshe, in the Chalkas Yaakov, and others regarding tuna fish if it needs a hechsher. Because I think, if I remember correctly, there were 24 different species of tuna, 23 of them are kosher, and one of them is not. And but when you cut them up, you can't really tell the difference because they all basically the same, kind of fish, tuna. So some say you need a mashgiach tamidi when you catch tuna to make sure it's all kosher. Others say you don't need mashgiach tamidi, but they say like in Thailand, and certainly you'll see a lot of the kosher tuna comes from Thailand. They say that in Thailand, if I remember correctly, the region there's no tamadiga fish, and they rely on this gemara here that if you know there's an area where the tamadiga fish does not go to swim, you're permitted to rely on the fact that they're all kosher fish, like Abai did over here with the chilik. Saying about it further, but today in that river, they diverted the waters from these different, they channeled the water from these different rivers into this river. They're not certain because you don't know what kind of fish that they're bringing in. The Gemara in Chulin said that every single living animal has a counterpart in the water. A horse, a seahorse, everything. So interesting. A chazer has the shibut. The Gemara says that high chamra the yama, the corresponding fish, the donkey, shadi, that's a kosher fish. But toida the yama, the ox in the water, the fish that looks like an ox, I'm not exactly what it is, also is forbidden. The samanot, remember that. Tamei tahor and tahor tamei. That which is tamei above land is tahor in the water, and that which is tahor is tamei. Now, if you remember that, you might as well remember the name of the fish, because how do you know which fish it applies to? So if you can remember the name of the fish, it's pretty easy to remember which is tamei and tahor. Rav says again, we're going to talk about different fish which we're not exactly sure what they are. So Rav Ashi says that Shvar Nuna Shari, that this fish that is called Shvar Nuna is permitted. But Kadash Nuna, this fish that's called the Kadash Nuna, which comes from the word Kodesh, also is forbidden. And how you remember that? It's among a Kodesh Lashem, that something which is holy is only to Hashem, not for us. We can't eat from that. Ikidam rather say Kvar Nuna, also this fish known as the Kvar, the grave of Nuna, is forbidden. To remember that kivre oived gechavim, that the grave of a goy is also aser. Unfortunately, I have a hard time understanding why the cave of a goy, the cave of Eden, is mutter, and is the cave of a goy really aser? Is there oil for hovering above the cave of a goy? Anyways, equal the Ginzig Rimos came to the town of Ginzig, Isla Kamehununa, they brought a fish, David Domi Lichipusha. They brought a fish that was very similar to a treifa fish called Chipusha. And this fish also looked like it appeared. There's no scales or fins. Chafia bedikuli, he bounced it around in his basket, and chazabe kalfi, and then suddenly, as he bounced around, and parts of the outer skin fell off, and suddenly they saw beneath that there was scales. Vishai permitted it. Rabashi equal to the Tamduria. He came to a place called Tamduria. Isaac Amahuna brought a fish that brought a fish that's similar to this fish called Flufcha, which is not kosher. Noctila had the yem, he put it out in front of the sun, he had a good look at it. And Chazi saw that made seems Vishayi, so that it had scales, and he allowed it. So Rabashi who asked Rabashi came to this place. Isaac Amahuna brought a fish that Sparnuna. Similar to a fish called Sparnuna, which is a kosher fish according to Rashi. He went ahead and he batted it around. He what do you call it? He covered it with something white, a white plate or something, or a bowl. And he saw kalfi, and then he saw that actually it brought out the scales. Vishai permitted it. Rabbi Bachana once came to a place called Akad Agma Kerifale. They brought him tzachanta. They brought him this sultanis that we said before, and it's kosher. Shaman Lugami overheard a person saying that recorded bati, that they gave it a different name called bati. Omar, and bati is not kosher. Omar, he said to himself, bati, since they're referring to this bati, why are they calling it bati when actually it's salantis? Oh, it must be something wrong with this fish. Maybe something tummy got mixed into it or something. He refused to eat from it. Well, it's the following morning, but he had a good chance. He had a chance to examine it. Ashway he found tummy mixed inside. He therefore said, Hashem protects the tzaddikim, that nothing should happen towards them. And Taisa already Gittin says it's only talking about eating food, not other things. Otherwise, how can tzaddik ever do an aveda? So when it comes to eating food, Hashem protects them that at the end they shouldn't be doing anything wrong. Even though we had a number of cases in Avodah Zarah, but in other words, the Rava made a psak, turned out to be was the wrong psak, and then it turned out to be that the circumstances were actually different than what he thought, and the psak turned out to be right. because lo yuna tzadik kol. So by Rava, it wasn't only limited to food; it went way beyond that. It went to everything that he did. Anyway, you have a piece of this kind of vegetable called chiltis, which is a very sharp vegetable, whatever that is, very sharp, very sharp thing. Someone wants to know my taina, so why shouldn't you eat it? So the Gemara, you know why? Because the maskele b'sakin, he cut it with a knife. No, the knife is ain't ben yoimei, nice and tam lebekam is mutter. What's the problem? I'm gonna mutter. Look, it's a foul taste. It doesn't matter. Agav churfei de chiltisa, because this chiltisa is so sharp. Is mechal yeleshem namusa. The fats transforms the pagam into a positive taste, and it actually contributes in a positive way to the food. There's a big machlekes are showing the Rajba and Toshabais and others, and that is what's the problem with a knife? So this rule is very important in halacha. Using a knife that's not a ben yomei on a sharp thing is very different than anything else. Everything else, the patas are not a ben yomei, so therefore, in nice tamagam is really mutter. So we come all kinds of kulas, but the evid, not when it comes to a knife, we say that it's also two ways of understanding pshat. One way is we are choishes that there are pieces of fats, gravy or whatever it is, grease that's left on the knife, and therefore the shamnunis, the sharpness or whatever this arim is, takes this shamnunis that's a day old and it's already spoiled, but it transforms it into something good. But the other way of learning pshat is that no, even if you clean the knife completely, the knife has absorbed in it flavor, and the sharpness of whatever you're cutting is so strong that it's able to penetrate the knife itself and transform the flavor that's inside the knife into something positive. Two ways of learning in Big Nachman Halach. That's the Gemara. Sorry. After Rabbi Levi have a kamaz with chiltisa, the servant of Rabbi Levi would sell chiltisa. They knew Rabbi Levi would not use a tray for knife, so they trusted. They would buy from his servant. Obviously, Rabbi Levi was mashgiach to make sure everything's all right. But the question was, kinoch nafshe when he passed away, also came Rabbi Yechon, went to Rabbi Yechon. They want to know if they can. Do we trust now the Eved? He's the one who's selling us all this time, but he always had an oversight committee. It was Rabbi Levi. What about now? Can we continue buying from him? Amalu, he said, the slave of a Talmud Chacham who is an expert and is very particular in the mitzvahs, you could trust the slave as well. He said, Hareyu kechaver. That's what Bechna said. He bought Chelis Ma'anche, the base of Amr Chasida. He trusted, Chelis, there's a certain dye from a tree called Kol Ilan that looks exactly like Chelis. And it's very easy to be conned. And all kinds of scammers can come along and sell you this thing and make a lot of money because it's but he trusted, he had mashgiach, he trusted the family of Amr Chasida, and he would buy from them this chelis. And then he passed away. So he wanted to know whether he could continue buying from the family because he was no longer there, Rabbi Amr Chasida. Lahavir Yosef didn't know. Pogabei Chanel Chait met him. Amalei Yosef Anya Menol. He said, I'll tell you exactly what you can do. Minole, how do I know? Because he says here, he says, Yosef Anya Minole. How would Yosef Anya know? I know because a story happened to me. But did he have Uvda? It actually happened to me. And what actually happened? So he said, there's a bit of the mountain the base of Rabbi Noah. I used to buy it's chelis from the house of Rabbi Noah Achmed Rabbi Chia, but I started coming to Masna. I went to the Masna and I asked him, he passed away, can I continue buying? Well, how he didn't know. Also the comment of Yehuda Magroina. So then I went to Rabbi Yehuda Magroina, and normally he said, Nafalt liyad, you fell into me. Hochi Amar Shmuel, you're lucky, because I know the answer. This is what Shmuel said. Eish is chaver, hareyu kechaver. We had this a number of times. The wife of a chaver is just like a chaver. They never learned Eish is chaver, and Ad chaver, chaver. They all once they grew up in a certain way, they continue that way. Chaver shemeis, a chaver who passed away, ishtay ubana v'bnei family areim echeskasad. You can assume that they continue in the same ways. Ad sheyechshdu until you have reason to suspect otherwise. The courtyard that they sell chelis doesn't mean the courtyard; it means the family. Areim echeskasad. That's the problem. He found something that to fault them with. Tolam learned in the Braisa, however, not so simple. We learn the Braisa, H is Amaoret, the wife of Amaoret, Shenisas the Chaver, if she married a Chaver, Ubem Bitish Amaoret, the son of a Dor Amaoret, Shenisas, that Lechaver married a Chaver, Chen Avdish Amaoret, Shenim Lechaver. All these people had no background, but then they join the family of a chaver. Kulon tzrichen lekabel divrei. You can't automatically assume that now that they're living in the house of a chaver, they're behaving like a chaver. They need to take upon themselves and make a commitment that that's how they're going to behave. What about the other way around? Who started out that way and then she married Lamoris. They don't have to because they were brought up in a way to behave like a chaver, so therefore they probably will maintain that. Now those are the words of Ameir. Now Yehuda says, even if they start out the right way, if now they marry, they step down, you need to make kabul divrei chaveres. You still have to find out the chatchila. You should get them to commit. You know why? Because as we'll see, the story of the woman. She married a chaver. Is like tefillin al yoda, and she used to put. Interesting. She would put on tefillin on this person's hand. So here that woman could put on tefillin on a man. Nisas lemeiches. Then he married a tax collector who we generally say are Hasidic Ganadim, and they were very unscrupulous. She continued tying, but not filling. She would tie all the receipts that he used to take money from everybody's Robert and sons, and they gave them a receipt. So that's what she did. So she was accomplice to him. So in other words, you don't automatically assume that because they were a chaver when they were married to chaver, then now they marry a mother to maintain that particular lifestyle. Now the Gemara goes back to what we learned a while ago about a single seal or a double seal. And we said that in certain occasions where the guy has an advantage in trying to substitute what he has from you to something else, you need a double seal because he's willing to break through one seal if it's worth his while. So you need a double seal. That makes it very difficult. And we did discuss Taisus has all different opinions that the best seal, the optimal seals are to actually have Hebrew letters, Hebrew words on it, one letter on one part of the seal, another part. So therefore it's very hard for them to replicate it. So, come along, Rama says, Chavis, the letters that represent Chavis, we're going to explain in a minute, Aser, the Chaysamechad, one seal is insufficient. Champag and Champag, which we'll see in a minute what that is, Mutter b'Chaysamechad, one seal is sufficient. Now the Gemara says, what's Chavis? Chavis is Ches is chal of milk. If you're transporting milk, you have a double seal. That's what the Gemara thinks in the beginning. But we'll see the Gemara will change that. You don't have double seals on milk. Secondly, basa meat. Meat needs a double seal, so you have a wrap with tape, and then you have a seal from the machshir. Yain wine is a double seal, and also chelis. Also, blue wool you need a double seal because they can make a fortune if they can substitute this kola ilan, this dye for the chalazon. They'll make an absolute fortune. So the Gemara, so all of these are forbidden with one seal. What about chiltas? This vegetable that by a goy we say we don't trust. They might have used a knife. They've used a tray for knife, or which would have used a tray for knife. And so you don't send your thing with them, your chiltas, because they might substitute, their chiltas for yours, and they can sell you for more money. Murius, and that's that mixture there with fatty fish, pas and bread, and gvin and cheese. All of these mutarach method, one seal is sufficient. Not really worth his while to go and for one seal. There's not a big advantage. Now Gemara goes through the following. Pas. Why need a seal at all? The meinechel. What are we worried about? He's going to swap your bread for. Remember, there's no kosher ingredients in bread. They're not kosher ingredients. It's all the same, flour and water. So what are you worried about? Your bread is nice and warm, and he'll put an old bread in his place. Maybe the other right away, everyone who'll buy it will take one bite, and they'll right away see that you're a ganef. So what are you worried about? The chitib decided he'll take your bread that's made out of wheat, and then he'll substitute it, put barley, give a barley bread in there, and the barley bread obviously is a lot cheaper. Not immediate. Everybody will taste it. They'll right away know you're a ganef. There's no point in being a ganef when you be caught out straight away. So what are you worried about? The two loaves are exactly the same, so therefore you won't catch him. So what was the point? So the Gemara is saying here that maybe that's why you need still one seal to make sure that he won't bother because it's exactly the same. You can even ask the why you need a seal at all. Anyway, then the Gemara says, Rav Maishna Gvin. Why does Rav make a difference between milk and cheese? When it comes to cheese, he said one seal is enough because you're not going to bother and to change it. Maishna Gvin milk also. You won't be madriach, and you won't. Why would you substitute tray for milk for kosher milk? For once you have one seal, it's not going to go through the hassle. It's not such a big difference. Aram Kana apikal right. Milk you do not need two seals. Drop it. So instead of chavis, it becomes bais. Only bais, you need 2 seals. Take out cholav v'ayachatichas dog she'ein basimin, and put in the fish that has no simon. You know, it's if you send fish that has a skin on, you can write a receipt that has the scales in the fin, no problem. But if you send fish without the skin on, you need a double seal. Says the Gemara, Hainu basa is not included in meat. It's the same thing with meat. You don't know where it came from, so therefore you need double seal. Fish and meat, the same thing. And the Gemara, you're right, but today gavna basa. We'll have 2 kinds of meat. Dog. So it's still 4 items, but instead of chalav, it'll be dog. Shmuel says, no point in that. Bias, leave it as bias. Remove chalav, don't put in dog, bias. Also, b'chayse mechad is forbidden with 1 chayse. And mechad, mutter b'chayse mechad. But mechad is what we said, murias and chiltis and tchelis, that is, there was a b'chayse mechad. So Gemara explains. Basa yain tchelis surim mechad, and murias, chiltis, and gvina, sorry, gimel is gvina. Is mutarim b'chayse mechad. They're mutter with 1 seal. So the tchelis is also 1 seal. So that's bias and what do you call it? And metik. Says the Gemara. L'shmuel, according to Shmuel, what about chatichas dog she'ein basimin? He says haina basar. For me, it's included basar. Today, gavi basar. I mean, I don't believe in this thing. There's 2 kinds of basar. There's no such thing as 2 kinds of basar. Second one, we learned, ain't loichin. What you don't take is, and we'll soon explain what they are, you don't buy in Syria. The Yiddish storekeepers cannot be trusted. They will make believe pretending as if they're the ones who are manufacturing selling to you. It's actually bought it from going. And even though they don't believe in one concept, kulif neiver. They don't care. Business is business. If you do it, it's your problem. They don't really care. So you cannot trust them. So what don't you buy from them? Ein loichin, you don't buy the following. Yimach and mechek. What are they? So Yimach is lo yain, don't buy wine from them. Lo modius, nor do you buy them. Modi lechol no milk, but melech salkundis. The Gemara says in a minute what melech salkundis, salt or salkundis. We'll see what that is. Lo chiltis, nor that vegetable. Even though they might not have tray for knives, but they buy it from goyim and will give that cheese. Element amumcha, unless you can trust this person. The cooler, however, fascinating thing. Business is business. In this arech etzel balabayis mutiv, if they offer you this food in their house, you can trust them, because since they're eating it themselves, we assume that they're keeping kosher, unless you know otherwise. And in business, you can't trust them because they have a thing. Business is business. It's not my problem if you do the wrong thing. If that person sends it directly to your house, from him, mutter, by timer, if he's sending it from his house to you, you can eat it, because we assume that the stam person is kosher, even if he sells treif in the store, but in his house we still assume it's kosher. When he sends you, he probably sends you things that he himself can eat. Melech, he mentioned the salt of salkundis. What is that? It's melech is salt. She called salkundre. That all the bakers of Roimi oichlin oisa. It's a salt that they all use. And therefore, why is it forbidden? Because they mix in there the fats, the innards of a fish, which are not kosher, and they make big blocks out of it. And that they use the salt and make 1 piece out of it. That's why it's forbidden. If it's black salt, asur is forbidden. Levon, if it's white salt, mutelis is permitted. Because white salt probably didn't mix any tray for fish in there. Rabbi Yehuda says no. Levon asur, white is also shchayim mutelis, black and mutelis, opposite. Rabbi Yehuda Zuva Surah, so everything is Asr. The one who says that white is Asr believes Kirve Dogim Levanim Tmeim Murav, but he believes that they only use white fish. So the one who says that black salt has been because Kirve Dogim Tmeim Murav, it makes him dark. Both Asr they're both mixed in, they black and white. We had an old man in our neighborhood. Worse, he would actually, to make it glisten, he wanted everything to shine to attract customers. He was trying it with fats of a chazer. So then Mishnah continues over again. All of these are usher in drinking and eating, but not usher in hana. And we'll know why you repeat that. Lemuti might tell you that the other thing that might be usher bahana. So lechizkia, according to Chizkia, lemute the yedua. Chizkia said that if you have this preserved food or marinated food, if you know for a fact that wine is mixed in, then not only is it usher bachila, but it's also usher in having hana. And or Rabbi Yechanan the mute to exclude Murius, he holds like Rameh that one would talk to exclude Murius, which is Rabbi Yechanan argues with Chizki, right? Rabbi Yechanan holds that even if you know for a fact that there's wine, it's only also because it's only there to take away, you don't really, it's not really part of the food that you eat by preservatives. So according to him, what's the Mishnah coming to exclude? Coming to exclude Rameir's opinion, who said that Murius and Givina is based on Nike. Rameir's opinion that Murius with the mixed wine and Givina, the cheese, are based on Nike. And we had all the different opinions why is Osman of a stomach Rameir. And it follows like Rameir. This Mishnah goes like Rameir to tell you that these things are mutabanov. The following is not what Rameir holds in those things. There's a Mishnah. The following not only is it permitted, Hanoi allowed to eat. Cholav shechol bo'oivik milk the cow. Sorry, if a guy milk the cow, the Yisrael eat salt. In other words, it's chol Yisrael, mashgiach. But vash and honey. Now, this is very interesting about honey. The Gemara, okay, wait a minute. The Abdonius, and we'll see this is a cluster of grapes, even though there might be some juice on it, grape juice on it. Even though it's dripping on it, Emeshim Hechsher Mashkin. We know that that in order for something to be susceptible for tumah, it has to first get wet. This wetness is not a problem. That's not considered because you don't really want it for wine, as we'll see. The kvashin and those marinade stuff, you don't put in the wine or vinegar, and there's no reason to ask it. The todis she'ena trufa, this fish todis, if it's not minced, you can tell that it's kosher fish. Or tzir she'yed like a brine that does have this fish, it has these fish inside it, which is a sign that it's a kosher fish. But Allah chiltas you cannot eat because they would cut it. But the leaves of the chiltas that they didn't cut with a knife, and therefore it's kosher. The zeise gluskois hamagugolin, and olive that they press into a round keli and they get warm, and they sort of form the shape of a cookie, of a biscuit. In fact, what's the problem? We'll talk about why should it even be an issue. Rabbi Yossi says that hashalchin asuri. We'll see. We're talking about olives, and we'll see what the Gemara will tell us what it means exactly. What's asur? Hachagovim. When it comes to grasshoppers, haboyim min haslul. If it comes from the basket, the guy standing out in the front, you cannot buy straight from there because maybe he put some wine in there to keep it fresh. Suri, I mean, I have to, but he brought it from his warehouse. Mutarin is permitted because if you wouldn't put wine there, because it'll get ruined eventually. Chayin the truma. Same thing about a kohen and truma. If a kohen has a store and he puts out food, whether you're worried about truma, depends where it comes from the warehouse or just sitting in the front, and we'll see later in the morning. Quickly, the Gemara. Tanil, we learned. Yoshev Yisrael b'tzad Edrichem, that a yid can actually sit by near the flock of a goy. And the guy can milk or maybe bring to him not worried about. Now what's going on here? There's no not kosher animals. He's sitting there. There's no non-kosher animals. That's good enough. Shit. What are you worried about? He's a mashgiach. He sees nothing can come in, and there's nothing there. So it's cholov that he watches. So what's the chiddush? And if there was something tamei if you sat, you're not watching what's going on. How can it be kosher? So the chikai, if you stand up, chazi can see. The chiyase, when you sit, chazi cannot see. So malat, I would have thought keeping the fact is right now you're sitting, chazi cannot see. Nechus, let's be concerned. Dilma, maisi, matter. Worry about the big tray for milk and substitute kosher milk. So and mix it in. So why aren't you worried? Kamashalan, the chiddush is kiva the chikai chazile. If he stands up, he can see. To say mirta, the guy is scared. The loy me'erabe, he won't mix anything in. Hadash honey. What are you worried about honey? Why do you have to tell me? What's the problem? If you can tell me what? That maybe he mixed in wine. Mr. Sorry, wine will ruin honey. And even should be shalakum, he cooks it. We have a rule that if it's edible when it's raw, you're allowed to eat it cooked. He cooked it in a not kosher pot. We said before, we assume that every goyish pot is not a ben yomer, and therefore it's nice and tan lebagam foul test. The zamagamu mut is permitted. So therefore, that's why it is permitted. The Mishnah, that's why it's permitted. Just the last thing about Dabdonius and the Dabdonius, these are clusters of grapes. Even though there's juice, there's no problem of the mashka that's making susceptible to me. But Aminu asked a question, we learned haboitza legas. If somebody's cutting down grapes to put into the vat, Shammai says huksher. any juice that came out of the grapes, so it prepares the grapes to be susceptible to makabel tuma. And Hillel says, lo huchsher. It's not. And then Hillel had to admit to Shama because of a gzera that because if we can allow this, next time there'll be real wine on the grapes, and you'll think that it's not susceptible to tuma. So what's the difference then? How come in our Mishnah it says that the juice around the grapes doesn't make it susceptible to tuma? Says the it's very different. There, you're trying to bring it to the vat because you want to turn it into wine. Any juice that comes out, you're happy with. Here, you're just cutting the grapes to eat the grapes. You're not interested in the wine. Therefore, the mashka doesn't do anything for it. We'll stop over here and continue tomorrow morning, Mr. Shah.